I need support staff to clear the room. Stand up and walk, now.
Hello, and welcome to The Watch. My name is Chris Ryan. I am editor at TheRinger.com, and joining me in the studio, he never doubted Nick Foles. It's Andy Greenwald!
So inaccurate.
Man.
So many doubts.
Let's see. We'll find out. Monday could be a very happy show for us. It could be a kind of a melancholy show for us.
We usually don't cross the sports and culture streams.
Do we not? We work at a sports and culture website.
Shouts to our livelihood. Well, we don't on this podcast.
Greenwald, it's Thursday. It's the re-up. We have special guests today.
Yeah. Very excited to welcome in the co-creators, the co-stars of Comedy Central's very funny show, Another Period, Natasha Leggero and Riki Lindhome. They stopped by. We chatted with them.
I wanted to ask you something before we're also going to do Dark Thursdays today.
We're not just any Dark Thursdays.
The finale of Dark Thursdays.
We are wrapping up Dark Thursdays.
If you're not going to listen to that segment just now, I want to tell you something up front. I promise you will like this show. I can't.
What show?
Dark.
Oh, I thought you meant our podcast.
No, I meant like if you haven't been watching Dark, if you're like, oh, they're talking about Dark again, guys.
Come on now, guys.
It's really, really, really good. Like you guys followed me into the Ozarks. You followed Greenwald into 1980s Washington, D.C. with the Americans. 7 of you did.
You didn't.
I didn't.
Bad example. Go on.
But we really, I don't know how emphatic we can be about how good this show is. And we will talk about that later on. But without going into any plot, without going into any spoilers or anything, I just wanted to sound a general ring of endorsement for this. I did want to ask you one thing, though, before we got to our interview with Riki and Natasha.
Is the question in German? Because I'm fluent now.
Natasha was talking about, spoiler for this interview, a little bit about how she has a bigger IMDb than Meryl Streep. That she's got more credits than Meryl Streep.
To be fair, they were both very good in Silkwood.
I don't know if you listened. I think I talked about this a little bit on the Bill Simmons podcast.
Not familiar.
We were talking about whether or not if Daniel Day-Lewis did as many roles as Russell Crowe, who would we think was a better actor? Is it that Daniel Day-Lewis is just a once in a generation, the next Brando, the last Brando, and did 8 movies or whatever it was over 30 years, and now he's out after Phantom Thread, which we will also be talking about shortly, not today, but down the line, and then is just like, I'm out. But if he had to do Proof of Life, and if he had to do Body of Lies, and if he had done,
what if he had done the Ridley Scott wine movie?
Good Year.
Yes.
So I'm saying, like,
boy, he would have been good.
Do you think DDL keeps up that level of performance, or do you think that Russell Crowe, if he only ever does 4 movies, is he like that's the best actor of all time? It's
a great question. Definitely not, because it's a versatility thing. Think about it this way.
Yeah.
Think about the reverse, or at least with a reverse perspective. Daniel Day-Lewis would be anywhere ranging from delightful to magnificent in just about any Russell Crowe role.
Okay.
Maybe not LA Confidential.
If DDL and The Mummy would have been, this is an ambush.
I'm not saying the movie would have been better, but I'm saying he would have been good in all of those roles, and you cannot say the same is true in the reverse.
Okay.
It's just a different vibe, right? I mean,
I agree. I think that the answer is somewhere in between. I think that if DDL had more plate appearances, there's just a higher chance
your batting average goes down.
He could have been in a movie where it wasn't Jim Sheridan directing, wasn't Martin Scorsese directing, wasn't PTA directing.
Sure.
And you might get a wonky movie.
I think that here's something to remember about. Are we doing DDL now? Now that he's done, are we coming up with a cute little?
I like saying DDL.
How many times, or when's the last time you saw Room with a View, the Merchant Ivory 1986 film?
It's on the rewatchables list, but I haven't seen it yet. No, it's not.
He's in that movie
man.
In a very small supporting role as a priggish suitor. God, he's good. You watch this movie and you're like, this character is not important, but this guy's incredible.
Yeah.
He's just really that good.
I just want to know if he was doing like Hackman's role in
how many people
of the State.
How many people do you think had Andy Talks About A Room with a View on the podcast on their like bingo card?
I'm sure someone out there
definitely.
has it.
Sorry, which Enemy of the State?
Yeah, if he had played Hackman's role in Enemy of the State, would he have been like, I need to method this. I need to know all about the surveillance state.
Yeah.
I need to know all about like NSA and all the like the secret edicts of the
But I love it. Like, this is the thing about Daniel Day-Lewis. You tell me these scenarios, I'm like, what if you played the Tom Cruise part in Tropic Thunder? It'd be incredible, right? Like, that would be good.
That would be pretty funny.
Come up with name a movie or an iconic role that would not
prompt.
be better.
You guys hit us up. If you can think of a movie that Daniel Day-Lewis would not have improved, you let us know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I also kind of want to know the ones that he really would have improved.
Like, what movie would you want to see him, like, as Robert Duvall in The Judge?
At the Watch Pod, all of these thoughts about Daniel Day-Lewis. So that
if you just got straight DDL thoughts, hit Zach Mack
because Zach Mack needs something to do with his time as punishment for not watching
Dark. Yeah. All right, Andy. Enough kidding aside. Let's get into our interview with Natasha Leggero and Riki Lindhome from the show Another Period, and then after that, we'll be talking about Dark.
So excited to have the co-creators and co-stars of the Comedy Central show Another Period, which returns to televisions on Comedy Central Tuesday, January 23rd at 10:30 p.m. Natasha Leggero and Riki Lindhome.
Hi.
Welcome.
Great to be here.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks. Our show's paired with Drunk History, so you can watch them both every Tuesday on Comedy Central.
That is both a nice pairing and very friendly of you to give the shout out to the other show as well.
Well, that show has probably a few more fans than ours, so I'm actually just trying to help our show by giving the shout out.
The benefit of Drunk History, which we do not need to continue to talk about, is that it's right there in the title.
It is.
You know?
You get it.
Also, it does have the same director as our show,
right.
So, and they're both period pieces. And they both, I would say, have the same tone of funny. So I feel like the people who like Drunk History would love our show.
But the title of Another Period can be confusing. It could be misconstrued.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the show Another Period.
All right.
10:30. See, I was telling people to turn on their TVs at 10:30.
Yeah.
I was just cutthroat. No 10 p.m.
Right. We're generous.
This is the third season. The show is incredibly funny and incredibly detailed with very many characters. Could you, since we want to expand the audience, can you explain the show to people in your own words? That's not there in the title.
I mean, in one sentence, it's if a family like the Kardashians moved into Downton Abbey.
Yeah, that's good.
So that's it's new money people at the turn of the century.
In America during the Gilded Age.
And I think I read...
It's very important that it's America because, you look at England and Downton Abbey and these people come from long lines of dukes and duchesses. And, our families are like, our dad was a fur trapper. They're all new money. And they have no taste and billions of dollars in 1902 that they don't have to pay taxes on because the income tax wasn't introduced yet.
No taste, but also no tradition. Nothing to base this on. No
manners, nothing. No education, nothing.
You look at Downton Abbey, and one of the reasons I think people loved it and escaped into it is because everything was appropriate. Everyone knew how to behave, and the upper lips were so stiff, and
that's almost why this has to be a comedy because these people know about all of the traditions, but they don't know how to follow them, or it's just not innate.
And the American upper class, they did do a lot of making it up as they went along for a couple hundred years, right? Like in terms of yes, this is when you stick your head inside of this, and that they were like,
go on about that.
I was just reading a book. It was more set in Jeffersonian stuff, but I was just like, holy shit, these guys don't know how to behave at all. I guess they still don't.
But also very, very, very recently removed from doing all sorts of terrible things.
Right. And but their family, all these people, their parents did the same jobs. Their parents were all, working class people, and then all of a sudden half of them have $1 billion and half of them have nothing. And they're like, go.
I read that, and please tell me if I read incorrectly, but that the genesis from the show came from the two of you talking about all the many projects you'd been a part of and asking point blank how many of them were actually funny. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. That's what happened.
I love this.
We saw some of the stuff we did. I mean,
I don't want to say none of them were.
I have more IMDb credits than Meryl Streep. I looked it up one day.
I probably do too.
I have 96. She has 76.
Slacker.
And I'm 30 years younger than her. So the point is, we've just done so much stuff.
Yeah.
And it's when you try to look at quantity, obviously isn't important always. But, it's you want to be a part of stuff that you really can get behind and are excited about.
And how did this end up being the idea that appealed to both of you?
Well, Riki and I, we went to Africa together for this, to help malaria. That's another story.
By the way, good. You did that though. Congratulations.
Yeah, for malaria no more.
Malaria's done. Right?
I know, right? It's
good work.
It's actually.
Is it doing well? Is
I don't know.
Cured?
It actually is getting close.
Well, Riki and I are largely responsible.
That's really
for
good
that.
news.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. No, it has. There is a cure. So
and there was a lot of education that needed to happen, and they wanted comedians to come and try to help. But
that's actually great.
So we did that, and then we kind of bonded there, and then we would come back and start talking, and like we both knew we wanted to like create our own show. And
at first we tried to do a reality show parody, and it's impossible.
It's
like parodying the president.
One.
Like you can't. Like there's nothing worse than what's already out there.
Yes.
And so and then
we read this book on Newport, and we were just so fascinated by the time that there was actually it still existed. These houses, like they were bought by the Historical Society, and you can go there and go on these tours and learn stories of all these insane, wealthy, eccentric people. And we just kind of fell in love with the whole era, and also the idea that like no one's really tackled the Gilded Age, especially in a comedy. So it just felt, everyone's like obsessed with the 1920s and the guns and the liquor and the men and the gangsters, and it's like that stuff is so overdone, and it's like the women really kind of got to shine almost in a way in this time period because the women run society, and Newport was all about society. So even though they couldn't vote, and by the way, voting did start there. Like all the it didn't, the meetings all started there. Like if you go to Newport, there's like votes for women stuff, like paraphernalia everywhere. Like,
and that's where the season begins.
Yes,
exactly. Third season.
Yeah.
Did you guys have was there any other historical period that was in contention, or did it actually just grow out of an interest in the Gilded Age?
It was just this, because Natasha had gone to Newport and seen the house tours, and then I went with her, and we went and saw it, and it's just so much comedy, and we're like, nobody's done this. It's just sitting there.
It's like kind of the amazing part about it. I was kind of like, I can't believe no one thought to do something like
that's
this.
the thing. When you're like, no, somebody did this, and you're Googling, you're like, no, no, great.
Well, another thing that's interesting about the Gilded Age, and basically was over as soon as they introduced income tax, which was like 1912, 1915, I think.
I think we're getting rid of that again, though. Just
that's what
by the way. So fingers crossed.
No,
but that's what I was going to say. It was over 100 years ago, but now it's like we've come full circle. And actually, Riki was saying that she read that the income disparity has never been greater than it was in the Gilded Age and then now. So those are the two times in history that we've had the largest gap between the rich and the poor. So everything is already, and it's not like we address all of these serious issues on our show. It's just kind of woven in.
What is the breakdown for the two of you between percentage-wise from research to just silliness? Because the show, maybe we've danced around this. The show is incredibly funny. They let us see the first two episodes of this season.
Oh, nice.
I love the second episode particularly, which is not premiering on January 23rd, but January 30th.
Yes.
Alongside Drunk History.
Alongside another episode of Drunk History, which but clearly you do research and you do care about accuracy on a macro level before you get down to.
But even on the silly level, some of the research brings us, like the dog dinner party from this first season, like that was an actual thing that this woman famously spent $100,000 on her dog's birthday party and invited other dogs, and they all ate whatever the servants fed them, and so we can take those things and obviously turn them into comedy.
It ends up being like 50-50. To answer your question, there it has to be silly. Like we have a scene where we're talking exposition, but we're also learning how to eat an ice cream cone, and we can't figure it out.
Because ice cream cones were just invented.
Brand
they
new.
were at the World's Fair.
Yeah.
So it's like,
And we just don't get it.
Is there stuff that you guys came across that you were like, this is almost too absurd to work on screen? Like any historical tidbits or stuff, like anecdotes that you come across and you're like, nobody would even buy this even as like a
we
broad
were like a
thing?
little worried about things, but people always pull them off. Like we had Harriet Tubman last year as a branding expert.
Right.
Because our characters want to get famous, and so that's all we want. But obviously it's very hard with no technology and no photographs and no movies, no whatever.
Yeah, there's like 4 famous women at the time.
You'd have to like
really
get a
hard.
portrait painted and hang it up, like a risque portrait, and hang it up at your dinner party. That's kind of like.
And then invite a lot of people to dinner
invite
for a long time.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like a long con. You had to wait for it.
Exactly.
One of the other pleasures of watching the show is there's a vibe that some comedy projects give off where it just seems fun. It seems like you're having fun. It's a large ensemble. You never quite know who's going to show up. You have a remarkable run of guest stars continuing into the season. How does that translate on set? Is it really as simple as you just call people you've worked with or funny people that you know or meet on tour or whatever the case may be?
Natasha and I have been in the comedy world for a long time, and you meet people, it's people we met 10 years ago at the Montreal Comedy Festival, and you have their number. And so you can ask them. And it's a privilege to be able to do that. And we realize that, but we just utilize it. We're like, we're going to ask all our funniest friends to come and play something fun.
That is like one of the perks of being in the comedy world, is that you know all the funniest people.
Right.
And you've worked with them. And, we've been really lucky because I don't think a lot of these guys, they majored in theater and they were in plays, and they don't get a chance to like act gay and like put on crazy costumes. And, I think most of the men in the show are gay.
Yeah, most of the characters are gay.
I think we've kind of like, we're getting revenge on all the times the men made us play prostitutes. I mean, not revenge, but, it's just sort of, we just think it's funny to have them be just sort of
all in love with each other.
Yeah. I really enjoyed, and can I spoil your show? I don't want to spoil it, but I really enjoyed Jason Ritter in some kind of convoluted Gilded Age underwear making a Carrie Matheson from Homeland crazy board and just shaking and screaming in frustration.
We were like, that was one thing we wondered if it was too stupid. We're like, can he think his mom is a ghost who's been with him his whole life? And we're like, yeah, he can pull it off.
Well, because he's so talented. He's such a talented comedic actor. That I don't know how he does it. He can pull off anything, and his physical comedy is so crazy, and it's but somehow still so grounded.
Yeah.
Do people need? I mean, 3 seasons in, I would imagine it's less. But I was wondering if people, guests who are obviously funny, they know how to be funny, but do they need coaching as to the type of funny you're looking for and the vibe? I was thinking specifically in the season premiere, which by the way, it's January 23rd.
Yes.
Jermaine Clement is on your show, and
he's amazing.
He plays our mom's kind of lover,
religious man / lover / multi-instrumentalist.
Yes,
as it turns out.
It's kind of amazing because we wrote that character with him in mind, but we didn't think he would do it. That kind of keeps happening to us. Like we'll use someone as like our prototype, and then they'll end up saying yes. So that's been really fun.
He just he swans onto your show like he was born to be there. Like he gets it.
People just get into the tone. I don't think we've had a lot of trouble.
I really think people like wearing costumes and being flamboyant.
That's a really good point.
I just think it's like, because where else do they get to do that, really?
That's why people like costume parties too, or like
Halloween,
right?
Yeah.
And they'll if someone's a guest star, they'll meet you at your level. If everyone's shouting in your face, you'll
Nobody's doing like, I want to do Dan Day-Lewis. And,
no,
yeah,
nobody's graduating.
You guys were talking a little bit about sort of comparing IMDb pages and wanting to do something together. Is there something about 2000 and whenever you guys started the show in 2015, or when did you guys first have the idea for it?
Gosh, seems like about 2 decades ago.
It seems so long ago.
Well, that's my question.
At least 2014, if not before that.
2014. Was there something about the way TV was changing industrially that sort of allowed this idea to come to fruition now, and maybe it couldn't have before?
I feel like we just kind of got lucky. Like I feel. Personally, I always felt like I was a little behind the curve. Like I always wanted like glamour, and I always wanted to talk about class, and that was just my personal obsession. But it wasn't always what was in style. So it's like sometimes you just have to like follow what you're interested in, and then hopefully the times will catch up.
Sure.
So I don't think we were specifically trying to target, this time. Like we weren't really even trying to make a satirical show. I think we wanted to wear like cool costumes.
Yeah, but we were really passionate about the idea. We knew we were onto something.
Good.
Yeah.
We thought of the ideas over a glass of wine, and then the next day we're like, okay, so let's make a short. Like we basically made a 10-minute pilot on our own right after that with the same director.
And
full costumes in a mansion, everything.
Before you were talking about, and I agree with you, like how hard it is to parody things that are happening in real time and seem beyond parody.
Yeah.
And yet here you're in the 3rd season, and the season premiere concerns women getting the vote, and women in politics and feminism. But these are topics that are relevant. I mean, they've always been relevant.
General in a way, so it's like that's almost better than like a whole episode about calling countries shitholes, because it's like Trump's going to say 50 more things by next week that are awful. So it's like you can't really target like super specific instances.
That's what I was wondering. So specifically, how you get into the topic. I mean, you have a way in because you're just telling things that are always relevant and also specific to your period, but.
And we're assuring the men in Congress that you can give women the right to vote because they won't vote for other women because they don't like other women. They're like, we're going to lose our power. And we're like, no way, not a chance.
It has been a bunch of 70-year-old white men in charge for like hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Like it's like it really hasn't changed.
It's strange that like no like 40-year-olds were like, let's change that ever in the last two. Like that there was never like any like movement against that.
Even the
Kennedy.
people that the liberals are excited about are like in their 80s.
Yes.
It's just like
You cast the Congress for the season premiere of Another Period, January 23rd, and it you could say that that's just the Congress today.
It looks the same.
It looks no different.
The photos are the same.
The mustaches, maybe.
And I was watching the show Victoria on PBS about Queen Victoria in the 1850s, and they all look exactly the same. I mean, it just hasn't changed, throughout history. It doesn't matter what country it's. Well, I'm sure there's some European countries.
You mentioned Victoria.
America.
I was wondering if there was like other Touchstone shows that you guys watched or drew from, even if just like tonally or acting wise, or just like beats that you've been obsessed with over the years.
Real
Definitely,
Housewives.
yeah,
Yeah,
and definitely
Housewives,
upstairs, downstairs, too.
Mhm.
If you take something like the Real Housewives and then also Upstairs, Downstairs, and Downton Abbey and Kardashians, it's like they're kind of opposites, but we kind of melded them all together.
And it's all about manners. It's all like this sort of like idea.
I don't know
like,
if the Kardashians is all about manners
or lack thereof.
Yeah.
Right.
Tact?
They're definitely
Yeah.
a good example of like the people with a lot of money who don't really understand traditions. And I'm sorry to make fun of them in front of you, Riki. I know you love them.
Oh, I like that show, but
I tease her for it.
I watched The Real Housewives and The Kardashians, but
Are
we
you-
bring
is
it
there-
to the show.
Do you have like a defined thing between Real Housewives and Kardashians, where you like one but not the other?
I don't really watch either of them.
Okay.
I mean, I will. Sometimes I'll watch a clip and be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe these people talk like this."
Do you do much reality TV in general?
I don't, but like I had like the Real Housewives. I feel like I really could get into, but my husband came home once and he was like, "Don't ever turn that on again." Like I just think it's like some men just have like this averse reaction. So if I'm alone, I think it's a fun like character study, but it is pretty mind numbing, and I think that people do use it to like clear their brains
Yeah, to
out.
chill out. Do you watch a lot more of? Do you watch a lot of reality stuff?
Those are the only two that I watch.
Okay.
But
What about Vanderpump Rules?
that kind of counts as a Real Housewife show.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
That's
it's under the umbrella.
Is
It's
that
Real Housewives of Jace.
Yes.
Got it.
borderline scripted, right?
They all are, aren't they?
Oh.
But they're all still working that restaurant for real. Like,
Okay.
Is it about a restaurant?
Yeah.
The
it's in-
only
it's in
reason
West
I
Hollywood.
don't think
You
it's
can go.
totally
What's it
scripted
called?
is because there's no way all those people are that good of actors. Like they cry all the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, these people can't cry on cue, like
Yeah.
on stage. They're not going to do Oscar Wilde, but they can cry like that.
How
on the
does she
show.
run a restaurant while like everyone's being interviewed?
I don't know.
You can, I can't
Well,
remember what
restaurant's
it's-
a tough business.
Yeah.
Probably most of the income comes from the cameras at this point, right? Like
Yes.
the chicken fingers are just like the loss
yeah,
leader.
I don't think they're
Oh,
super
it's called
focused
Sir.
on
S-U-R. Yeah.
Sir and Pump.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
This is
It's
really a
called
thing.
It's
Sir
really-
and Pump.
Those are the two
Not
restaurants.
this Sir.
They sound like
and
Gilded
then
Age porn
the other one is
instructions.
Yeah, they
Pump.
really.
Yeah.
S-U-R, S-I-R.
S-U-R.
Wow.
Okay.
Well, we're learning things here. Your characters on the show, Beatrice and Lillian. I'm curious. Seems like a silly question for the way the show has been up to this point, but do you see? I can't believe I'm using this word. An arc for them. Like, do you consider the show as you're making this season, hopefully multiple seasons? Is there a place they're headed other than fame or infamy? Like,
It's a
can
slow arc.
they grow and change?
Well, I mean, honestly, with sitcoms, I know this isn't quite a sitcom, but like, you do just want to kind of see them going back and forth. Like, it's
Yeah.
never
Yes.
like they're supposed to
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
some huge epiphany.
Well, in the old
I
style
don't think
sitcoms,
either
but
of
in a
them will
modern way.
ever
Right.
completely change. I think Beatrice, my character, could maybe change, but I feel like she's always going to not make the right decision. Lillian's never going to change.
no, she's pretty set in her ways.
Yeah, but we'll lead you toward that, and then at the last second,
So no
We'll
very
mess it up.
special episode where they.
not so far.
Maybe
but
in
yeah,
a
Beatrice
fantasy
keeps,
episode might be interesting.
Beatrice keeps getting close to realizing that she has a mind that she can utilize for things other than sitting there.
It's close.
And, yeah,
her argument to
Beatrice-
the Congress was very compelling.
Yeah, things just come out of her
Very
that,
insightful.
and then she gets shocked by it and goes right back to her.
Doesn't she realize this season that she's not immortal?
Yeah,
She thought she
That's a
lived
big shock.
forever.
It's a tough feat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
and
al-
So
Frederick
she's a
realizes
little bit
it
more
too.
of like a baby.
Right.
So she kind of, she's learning.
Learns from touching the hot thing and then you
Yes.
don't do it again.
over and over.
She also had the wisest description of vests that I've ever heard. That was my favorite line in the history of the show, where she says, what are the lines that nature is my sleeves?
Yeah, why not let nature be your sleeves? Yeah.
It's really good.
That was a fun line.
Looking forward on the show, are there inventions, historical figures,
yeah.
guest stars that are on your to-do list? Because you mentioned that you keep asking people who are your dream people, and then they show up.
Hitler's coming in episode 3.
Oh, good. That's good. Again, no relevance to today.
No, no one likes him or talks about him. He's 11 at the time, so he shows up and he's related to Lillian.
Yes.
Congrats.
Yeah. We subtly drop in season 1 that Hitler's in her name when she does the beauty pageant.
Right.
Like Lillian Abigail Hitler, Schmemmerhornfish. We just sort of gloss by it, and so
the family does get into an uproar because Italians move in, and this is something that we really learned in Newport from studying. Like they would get very upset when Italians started coming to this country, and that's a whole kind of thing that obviously relates somewhat to today, not necessarily with Italians.
Classic S-hole country, Italy.
Yeah.
It's generally we think about
any
it.
feedback from the Newport Chamber of Commerce?
I wish they would. I just want to get free hotels.
Yeah,
it's really expensive.
Rhode
to go
Island
there.
doesn't get many looks. The Farrelly brothers, I think, represent for it, but otherwise, you guys are doing the work.
But when we went there the second time together,
I think we got recognized.
Yeah, the people who did the house tours were like, "We know who you are."
I realize you mentioned that all of those big mansions were bought by Historical Society,
well,
but
some were bulldozed.
Okay.
Because the people couldn't afford to keep them up. You can't have 35 indoor servants and 45 outdoor servants when you're paying income tax.
What do you mean? You can. One couldn't.
Well,
maybe we could.
They were paying these people nothing. They were basically indentured servants, and they would come every week on boats, like from Ireland and Australia, like desperate. And Newport's like right at the tip, so it's like they would. The butler would just come out and be like. He probably would go to the dock. This would actually be a good episode.
Just scoop up.
And just scoop them up. And anyone who doesn't want to behave.
Yeah.
These people got no free time. They weren't allowed to date.
Yeah.
Didn't they? There was a strike and the servants wanted what? Like
they wanted an hour of free time a week. That was just for them. And the head of the household was like, no.
They had to sleep together. There was one tour we saw that had the servants staying on the 4th floor of the house, and it was like the most amazing views, but they had built a brick wall to covering up all of their views so that no one coming to the house would ever see a servant. And so it was like these people were treated really poorly. But what was your question?
I had a question. I also was going to say that since I have 2 kids, the request for an hour of free time a week sounded very reasonable. I actually thought that was that sounds awfly good.
Myself, yeah.
I'd look at a brick wall.
Yeah.
No, my question wasn't one of them also purchased by Taylor Swift? Like isn't she
bought
back
a
there?
Newport house?
Well,
because she did
that's
like
her
a
summer
whole
spot.
July 4th photo shoot there.
Wow.
That was,
I don't blame her. And she fell in love with it.
Well, it was she was living there or whatever, but she does these very highly orchestrated just hanging out casually on July 4th
with Haim and
synchronized
Lena
bathing
Dunham.
suits with Haim and Lena Dunham.
Yeah.
And synchronized bathing suits.
There is a beach there that we also used in our show called Rejects Beach, which is where the servants had to lay out.
But the funniest part is it looked exactly like the beach next to it. There's one ocean, and there was just a little fence.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, there's just a little fence, and they looked exactly the same, but no one would go on Rejects Beach if they were wealthy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's, Newport in the summer is so gorgeous. Like, I don't know if you have you ever been there?
Yeah, yes.
Because it's each house will have rolling green, and then it just turns into the sand, and then turns into the ocean.
I just feel like there's always a regatta.
Yeah, it's truly gorgeous.
I think I appreciate that you translated regatta for Chris because he definitely he didn't know. He did not know.
I didn't used to know what that was either. Isn't it just a bunch of boats?
It's just like a boat race.
That's how I would have defined it. A bunch of boats, but are they doing something?
Yeah. They're racing.
They have the regatta in Philly. Yeah.
Can you race those boats?
Yeah. You can. A lot of it depends on the wind, I'm sure. But
right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's pretty amazing though. Like one year I was there, they had a historic old ships convention. So you look out and it's just ships that have been restored from 200 years ago, just sailing through the waters, and it's pretty special.
And the servants are allowed to look for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
But yes, the Historical Society does own any houses that are left. I think. Well, no, that's not true. The ones that you can go through.
And so the last plug you guys have for what's coming up on the season is Hitler. That's what you're like, watch season 3.
Yeah.
Hitler.
He's coming.
He's coming.
He is. And, he's nice when he gets there.
But it's not like
but something changes.
Something changes. Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah,
wow.
he's a very nice little boy who's got his sketch pad. And
let's just say he might meet a Jew.
Okay. He might. It's possible in America. In the comedy business, it's possible.
And they might not like his art. Yeah.
Wow. Jewish critics always getting it. Can't say why that irks me particularly. Well, I think I can't imagine where we go after Hitler.
Can't top Hitler.
Yeah.
Natasha and Riki, thank you for coming to talk to us about the show.
Thanks for having us.
January 23rd, Chris. Did you know that?
I do now.
10:30 p.m. Whether you watch it at 10 or not, up to you. But 10:30 is when another period starts.
Thanks so much for coming by, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, Andy, we're back. Thank you to Natasha and Riki. Let's talk about Darkman. The final 4 episodes, right? So 7, 8, 9, 10.
Yes.
This is it's been quite a journey, man.
I am so happy we're talking about the end of the series together because there was a moment.
Season, because there's definitely going to be some more dark.
You're right. That is a very Freudian slip that we're going to get to. Because there was a moment yesterday when you were like, I might not be able to finish the season. Can we talk about the finale next week? And I couldn't do it, man.
Yeah. You were just being your
people
typical
know.
generous self.
Well, no, you people know that for a long time my professional diet was heavy, right? I was on like that sumo diet of television. Like I had to watch all of it, in big heaping portions just to keep that weight up.
Yeah.
When I stopped being the TV critic, I pulled back, maybe too much, and let a lot of things slide. This show, I could not stop watching, and I could not wait for a chance to get to more episodes of it by the end. I mean, it was the best kind of experience because it was a slow walk at the beginning and a full sprint at the end, but in terms of my interest.
For a show that's so much about time travel, it has these supernatural elements. I was surprised by how surprised I was by it. And not by the, ooh, look at the twist way. And there's quite a twist at the end of it. But more like the human decision moments and the consequences of actions moments that come across in those final few episodes, specifically Ulrich going back in time to attack Helga, which is really like, crazier things happen in this show by far, but that is one of the big gut punch moments. There's a couple of reveals over the course of the season, but it was really this idea that keeps getting battered home. And, it's German in subtitles and it's very dark and it's very solemn. But for some reason, unlike a lot of like heavy voiceover shows, I found myself mesmerized by some of the thematic repetition of the voiceover talking about, can we change the past? Mm-hmm. Can we change our future? Can we change our present? Or is there a such thing as fate? Is something bound to happen no matter what interference there is? Mm-hmm. And, of course it exists in the world of genre. And this is something that Mal and Jason talk about all the time, about the value of fantasy or sci-fi or genre work and what it tells us about the life we lead. But I found myself deeply affected by some of the underlying text of the time travel stuff, which is not something I thought I would be saying at 40 years old.
It's because, once again, to the enormous credit of the showrunners here, they put the humanity first, and then built a marvel of machinery behind them, like a level of rigor and attention to detail that is, dare I say it, positively Germanic.
Should we talk?
It's really impressive.
We haven't actually said this, but like the casting across 3 generations.
Oh my God!
Is like. I was like, oh, is this going to be like Looper where they just like change a dude's nose? And they just found great actors to play people at different points in their life, and they look alike.
Let's ask this question.
That's fucking crazy.
Let me ask a question of our European or European adjacent listeners.
Yeah.
Are there a lot of people in Germany who look alike? Like, I know that was, that's
a touchy subject.
I know wanting that got y'all into some trouble a minute or two ago. But all I'm saying is there clearly was some upside to that because
they got the Ulrich nose. They got Ulrich. They got the and that kid. The kid is a great actor because he does have that. Ulrich has that.
Which 80s Ulrich?
Bad boy. Yeah.
80s Ulrich looks mad like
old Ulrich.
Yeah. Not like Mads, by the way. I should be careful when I say that. It's how about 2 different Helgas?
Yeah.
Those dudes look alike.
Yeah.
They did a great job with that. That's an impressive thing.
Old
that
Helga is decidedly shorter. Do you shrink that much when you get old?
Do I personally? Yes. I'm just gonna stop you there.
Are you planning on it? No, I thought that was the one thing I noticed is that old Helga is giving up like 4 or 5 inches to 86 Helga.
That's the kind of like Reddit watching that this show I think does a great job avoiding, even though it obviously encourages it with how deep it goes, because we are completely on the ride with the characters. And I want to go back to a point you made at the very beginning, which is completely accurate. There are a number of twists and reveals, but probably the 2 biggest are related, like the whole show is related to the Nielsen family and who's who. The first one we discussed last week, which is Mikkel being Michael being Jonas's father.
Yeah.
I talked about how I called that, and I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
We also predicted that the mysterious stranger was Jonas.
Yes.
Something that they definitely steered into in the last few episodes with the hood and the wandering around and the role. That became more apparent. But the point that you made that is so true is that a lesser show would have lived or died on those reveals. For me, and this show is so good it doesn't need to slag off other shows, but it makes me think of something like Westworld, which I think everything depended on some of those similar reveals, the nature of a character, the true origin of a character, so much so that once you figured it out, you didn't care about anything else around it. On this show, those two things were predicted, but what Ulrich does with Helga in the 50s shocked me.
Yeah.
I was completely jolted and sat up on the couch because I was so invested in everything and because I was so accustomed and conditioned to expect a different result. So much so that it short-circuited the part of my brain that has been watching time travel and genre shows long enough to know that everything that happens has already happened and it always happened this way and blah, blah, blah. It short-circuits your expectations in a way that is truly thrilling.
So I'm glad you brought up Westworld, because I think what this show does, and you sort of see it when the Claudia stuff starts to come in and you start to see all the pictures on the wall of all the different characters at different points in their life or in their lives or however you want to put it. And I think that the rigor and the attention to detail with character that they have in this show supplants what we usually spend all of our time litigating the rules of time travel in something like this. Or in Westworld, we're like, can robots do that? Or like, why don't you just turn the battery off? Like, you just start to, if the characters are bad and the relationships between the characters are not deeply felt, the viewer is left to say, that's not how time travel would work.
Yeah, or we all become experts.
Why don't you just go back and not build nuclear power then, or whatever you want to do? But because you feel that this town is basically an accumulation of 5 families that seem to be living on top of one another and intermarrying. And I mean, you could get into the whole thing about whether or not Winden is real. I don't know if we're ever going to hit that. But
is it because the cops drive Mercedes?
Yeah, right. Because Charlotte's got that
benzo,
that drop top.
It's amazing.
Because you have such a deep connection to all these interlocking pieces. When they're just like, yeah, time travel can be done by like this watchmaker made a machine. We're not going to explain it, except that there's like, oh yeah, cesium can be ionized and that just opens up a black hole. And you're like, whatever. I don't even care. Like, that just sounds good to me. But the fact that like that dude's aunt is his grandma or his girlfriend or whatever the hell happened, like that moment where Jonas is like, I can't be with you. It's really an interesting shift on how you typically tell a story with these kinds of sci-fi or fantastical elements.
Couple things we should clear up. So these episodes, we go to the 50s for the first time. Again, really well done. The production design, the consideration, the casting, it's really stunning. As a big Egon fan over here.
Do you like Tiedemann?
I like Tiedemann. I like that older
Young
actor.
Egon or
I like
old
old Egon, and so but I just like that performance. I like that guy's presence. I'm a big fan of old school policing. Like I just goes by his gut. He just takes uncorroborated stories from teenagers and just runs with it. A question emerged from that time period. I definitely watched episode 7 or 8. Like maybe I was a little too tired to be watching it, so maybe this was obvious. Noah is Ulrich's grandfather? Is this the implication that I took away from the show is that this is all the Nielsen dudes?
Ulrich is Noah is Helga's father.
No,
sorry, Noah's not
So here's my breakdown of it. Helga's father is the old guy who runs the nuclear power plant, who gives the keys to the castle of Claudia in the 80s.
Yes.
Bernd.
Yes.
Bernd Doppler. Cool name, by the way. Not as cool as Bartos, but cool. Noah appears to be a pastor of some kind, a religious man.
Pastor.
Ageless.
Yeah.
When the Nielsens show up in town in the 50s, the first person they see is Ulrich walking down the road, and then they make it to the Tiedemann house where they're going to be living as boarders.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's Mrs. Nielsen, I guess, and her son Trant.
Yes.
So they show up. She talks about her husband being dead, but says that he was a religious man or a pastor. Okay. So my inference is that that's Noah, and yet somehow Noah also shows up concurrently. Could also
be the same. We could be talking about he could be Ulrich's father,
yeah.
but there's that scene
Ulrich's
where grandfather. But when Helga goes missing and his mom goes to the priest and is like,
"That's Noah.
Maybe this is my fault because I know he's not
right."
I thought Noah was like, you and I made this baby together.
Oh,
not explicitly, but she's like, it might not even be Burns.
Oh, there is that
and
part
I thought
too.
He was
yeah,
like, you know, like we're doing this together. Like it's like I thought that
right.
Noah was Helga's father to make the Antichrist, basically.
Right, man. So there's a lot.
Yeah.
So there was a little lack of clarity for me on that, but here's my bigger takeaway from this that I'm curious your thoughts on. And I'm curious about our listeners' thoughts on this too. I was so enthralled to the show and I loved it. I couldn't wait for more. And what I loved about 7 and 8 particularly was that I felt the knot tightening. There was this, some things were spelled out. You know, that image, the 3 possibilities, the past, present, and future. Sure. The idea of this cave linking all 3 at the same time, and you need to shut it down.
They clearly invested something in Claudia in the 80s, but hadn't really taken her beyond finding out what's under there until later. You know?
Well, so you're coming at it the opposite way. What happened to me was I was so excited for this to be resolved. I fell prey to a very, I guess I would say, it's not old fashioned, it's actually modern thinking, which was they are going to tell this story this season.
Yes.
I knew that it was a big enough investment that there might be more types of stories or more things to come. Then in 9, I began to realize that
this is just the beginning.
Well, Noah is not a realized character. We don't know the origin of this room. We don't know what he's chasing. There's no motivation, unless my hope was the motivation was that he's just the grandfather and it's always about this one family. Suddenly Claudia comes back. Suddenly you realize that the Bartos stuff isn't going anywhere. And then I got that sinking feeling that this was all prelude. And listen, don't get me wrong. I am pumped up to go back to Germany, to zip up my parka and go whenever they make more of these episodes. But there was something that felt a little, I was disappointed because I wanted more resolution. And the thought of introducing another timeline, which they did.
Yes, into the
future.
I would assume 33 years.
33 years.
2019, whatever that is.
42, 2042. It didn't make me as excited as I hoped because I was enjoying it so much for what it was, which is something that modern TV has allowed me to do, to assume that you're just going to be essentially one and done.
Yeah, and they have a lot of hanging threads there. So Ulrich is being beaten in a jail.
He's stuck in the past. Charlotte knows he's there.
And Charlotte knows he's there. You know, I think that what happened to me in the middle of the season, somewhere around when they, like what you're talking about in the 50s, when they bring the 50s in really hardcore, it was like reading, I remember the first time I read Richard Price's Clockers, and I was, they do a lot of switching of perspective between Rocco, the detective, and Strike, the drug dealer, and it goes back and forth. And I remember the first time I read it, I was just obsessed with Strike, so I was just like, I don't really want to read about some Richard Price cop. I want to read this incredible, character study of this drug dealer. And then you change your mind midway through and you start getting into the Rocco chapters. This happened with this show where I wanted just this high school drama, basically like Riverdale with time travel. And then it got into the 80s. And at first I was like, oh, this is familiar territory with Stranger Things. But then I got into the 80s part.
Yeah.
Then I got into the 50s part. I think that I've just now, they have my trust. So if they want to do Jonas is John Connor and this is the Terminator and Claudia is Sarah, and wants to send him back to stop the apocalypse, they have my attention.
Yeah, they've certainly earned it. I think that's well said. How do you feel about the future? I mean, about the future being a major player in the show. I mean, one of the things that was nice about this, and maybe it's specifically because of the cultural dislocation. As you said, they went to the 80s and you expected Stranger Things.
Yeah, if this was Philly, you might be a little bit more
Yes, because, and we talked about this when we first started talking about the show, the relationship to history, to family, to country, to nuclear power, the proximity to Chernobyl, all of these things are very, very different culturally in Germany. The 80s and 50s felt like interesting takes on eras for us. when I see future and I see dystopia, I start to recoil a little bit.
Well, there's also a challenge for the storytellers involved because everything that happens in the 50s, 80s, and 2019 wouldn't necessarily cross the threshold of other people would know about this. You know, a child going missing in a small town, while a well-worn trope in crime stories, you don't see that on the national news necessarily, or even on your Twitter feed now, right? But a nuclear accident, or in this case, apparently an apocalyptic accident, would change the world around Winden.
And the relationship to Winden.
So there is no reason for any of these characters to leave Winden, even though a few of them say they want to. It's all contained in this little diorama, and it's kind of perfect that way. But when you open up the world to, okay, we're going to have these world-changing events taking place here, it'll be delicate to see what they do. Maybe they leave Winden. I hope they don't. I mean, everything about that show was so tied up with it's the forest, it's pouring rain, you know, it's so moody. And they did a nice job with the nuclear winter snow falling and the Mad Max trucks and the crazy flying helicopter, whatever that was at the end. But I am I cannot wait for season 2, but I see what your point is.
Should we do just like an end of your kind of power rankings thing here? Your girl Regina's on an ill mission, man. Reggie took a dark. She did a full heel turn at the end there. I mean, Jonas can keep giving her those hugs, but it's not imparting the sort of empathy that I think they're intended to impart.
Yes.
You know, that's a rough one.
Hannah's like the rise of Scarface right now.
Charlotte remains the queen.
Can I just quick note about Charlotte, who is my favorite character?
Yeah,
but if I, as a police detective, had a strong suspicion that my spouse might be a child murderer, and my husband or spouse called me and said, I have to talk to you.
Not just that. I have to talk to you about the bunker.
Yes.
Yo.
I take the call. Yeah. Just my note. Yeah.
This isn't...
Instead of just staring at dead birds or...
This isn't like you're...
looking at some microfiche.
Your man's not like, I need to talk to you about the man cave.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not getting the Bundesliga package in it like I once was.
Dortmund lost to Bayern,
Nah. He's like, I live a very sketchy life on the DL, not the DDL. Although that casting choice would be interesting. And... yeah, so I'm calling you about the bunker and the red clay from where I drag the bodies that don't have the ear canals. Yeah, she should probably take that. But look, the call of the microfiche is strong.
It is.
You know, the siren song.
That was a great moment when Ulrich shows up in the microfiche.
Well, because also, you know, there is an element, maybe this is as good a place as any to end on, but one of the things that is often said about the Duffer Brothers and Stranger Things is they know their audience. You know, they are their audience. They know the tropes and the little buttons to push. I think there's a much more distinguished way to know your audience, a much more intricate way to know your audience. And what I mean is the people who made Dark are aware that at a certain point, the audience will be frustrated that people aren't looking right under their noses. It established for us that Mikkel is hiding in plain sight, that he's in photographs hanging in the school that have always been there.
Yeah.
No one forgot that because it was a cool moment. To have Charlotte see Ulrich when she did scratches that itch. Someone saw something. Yeah. Someone's on the trail. Someone's on the path.
I would be interested. I don't know that I would necessarily need to rewatch the whole thing, but especially the earlier scenes with Jonas, the adult Jonas, coming from the future or whatever. Some of the things that he says and does, I'd like to go back and see in terms of knowing what we know now, especially when he stops young Jonas, right, from saving his own brother.
Oh, he does that?
No, saving
his father.
Yes.
No. He stops him from taking Mikkel back.
Yes. Right.
He's just creeping through time, that dude.
That dude is just on a mission.
He's very, very, very comfortable doing that.
I can't tell. Does this show get the belt?
I mean, for us, because it dominated our thinking.
I'd say it was probably the show that you and I are most passionate about in a very long time.
People have asked, would it have found a place on our top 10 list had we watched it? Yes. I'm kind of glad it didn't, because then we didn't have to do that math, but yes. But it also is kind of a strike against the whole belt concept at this moment, because it's filtering into people's world slowly, which makes it fun in a more old-fashioned way.
This is the Netflix way now, is that they may have things that are big first weekend hits, but people are going and finding End of the Effing World weeks after the fact.
And we're going to talk about it next week. But just a couple other points that are just lingering. What cocktail of drugs from the plastic bag did Bartos take in order for him to be super chill about his Mad Max grandmother walking in from the backyard? Bartos doesn't even bat an eye, man. He's like, oh, you crazy old lady.
Yeah, he seems to be taking this breakup with Martha and is just like, I'll become the Antichrist.
He's cool with it.
Yeah.
He's cool with it. I mean, first of all, Marta is a catch.
Can I just ask you really quickly, snap decision? Is it possible that Noah is good and Claudia is bad?
No. Right?
Well, that's what Noah is pitching.
Right. I think
that Jonas thinks he's working for good by working with Claudia, and that Claudia knows and is just like using him.
Well, what do we know? But we can't predict. But I think what we can do is base some assumption from what the creators have given us so far, and what they appear to be giving us is a story built on the back of very familiar tropes and stories and relationships, and doing A+ versions of them.
Right.
So to do one of those switcheroos seems surprising to me. Clearly, there are cards yet to be played, especially if Noah's like, Jonas, I am your great-great-great-great-grandfather, or whatever he is. It's family first, man.
That's right.
That's really the motto about this. Family first.
Okay.
What a fun show.
Great show. We'll wrap it up there. On Monday, we'll talk about the Oscar nominations. We will talk about...
Next Thursday.
Let's wrap it up there. On Monday, we're going to have a special guest join us.
Yes.
The Ringer's Juliette Littman. She's going to come by, and we're going to talk about ER's arrival on Hulu. So
making a big impact on the culture.
If you're an ER head, make sure you tune in for that. And if you've never seen ER, you're really missing out on quite a great show. We'll also be talking about whether we are in or out on Netflix's End of the Fucking World. And I think we have anything else on Monday?
That's what we got, but there are a lot of shows we're going to be covering. We're going to take a look at Stars' Counterpart next week. We're going to be revisiting Versace for the second episode next Thursday.
That's right. We got Mosaic coming from Steven Soderbergh on HBO.
I don't know if you guys can tell, but we are on TV in 2018. Look at us.
Yeah.
We're watching stuff.
Okay, till next time.